Very early and good morning to you all for watching this video. I'm on a little exploratory trip, a little trip out to see how the Mini will really compared to the Kona Electric, on a trip where I'm going to exceed the distance for the Mini. I'm going to need to recharge, but in the Kona it would have been extremely easy. It's a 218 mile trip, so in the Kona it would have been there and back, and I could have probably left with 70% state of charge. It really wasn't a big deal for the Kona, and I didn't think I'd be doing this journey very often, and that was part of the reason for getting the Mini Electric, that I just didn't need that extra range. And if I did, well, you know, I don't mind charging. You know, charging isn't the end of the world. Or is it? Because if you're like me, you avoid charging and public charging like the plague. It's just something that you really don't want to do. It's not that it's so terrible or it takes so long. It's just that, well, you have to pay for it to start with. It's part of my game that I play with the car, to try and not pick the most efficient route, not pick the fastest route, not pick the most optimum charging route, which a lot of people will do. I'm looking for the best efficiency and the cheapest trip cost. Those are the data things that I like to play with. Now that's part of owning an electric car, it seems. As soon as you get an electric car, instead of it just being an A to B thing that you might occasionally look at miles per gallon, there's all this extra data. And for some people, you know, even online you see people doing races. Well, who can get there first? Who can do the optimum charging and arrive first? It's about time, and that's not for me. I've got all the time in the world. I've got all day today for this trip, and I've left at absolutely silly o'clock. It is 5:23 at the moment, and I've driven 16 miles. I started with a full state of charge, 100%, and it showed 121 miles on the gong. Now, if I've got 218 miles to go, and in theory this car will do 120 to 140 miles from full to empty, then I've got somewhere between 70 and 100 extra miles to add worth of charging into the car. And if I presume I'm going to get 5 miles per kilowatt hour, which at the moment I'm not, 4.5 is what I'm getting, then 5 miles a kilowatt hour into 100 is 20. I need 20 kilowatt hours of charging. So that's what I need for this trip. So the question is, well, how to get those 20 kilowatt hours and when to get those 20 kilowatt hours. I'm 16 miles in. If I saw a charger now, I could pull over and add a few kilowatt hours. I don't know what my battery state of charge is. 90%. So I've got 10% I could add. So I could stop and charge anywhere from now, 16, 17 miles into the journey, all the way up to when I actually arrive. So there's lots and lots of choice of how to plan your journey. And when you look on the Better Route Planner and Zap Map and PlugShare and all the apps that you might use to find chargers and plan your routes, they all seem to want to take you the fastest, most efficient, as in getting you there sooner, route, which is not what I want to do. What I want to do is take the most interesting route. So I'm going a more scenic route that I will enjoy the drive of more, and it's also a slower route, so there are less 60 and 70 mile an hour roads. There's going to be more 50 mile an hour limit roads, and through some villages at 30 miles an hour. So because of the slower speed, it's going to take me longer to get there, you know, an extra 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, maybe less than that, I really don't know, but it just doesn't matter, because those extra 10 or 15 minutes aren't critical to my life today. And it surprises me that so many people, everybody else it seems, are all just in such a hurry to get to their destinations, that 10 minutes or 15 minutes seems to be important, or they're being encouraged to think it's important, when in reality it's not. In reality, calm down, slow down, take your time, plan plan your route more, stop more often, enjoy your day, and get better efficiency, spend less money, be better for the environment. There's just so many positives to say about just going a different route. But having said that, if you all go a different route, then this road would be a lot busier than it is, and the other one, the A47, would be really quiet. So maybe then I would choose to go over there, because I like to do the different thing. If everybody is over there doing that, then I want to be over here doing this. I don't want to be where everybody else is, because if you're like everybody else, well, you're just average, aren't you? And I don't like to be average. I like to do what I want to do. I've deemed that if I drive from the other side of Norwich, where I live, and stop at Fakenham, which is about 35 miles, there's a free Tesco pod point there. So I could stop there for half an hour, and add a few kilowatt hours for free, which would reduce the amount of kilowatt hours I've got to add and pay for later in my journey. But equally, if it's only 107 miles to get there, and I think I'm going to do 218 in total, well, I could get all the way there in the Mini, 107, without charging. So if I add a few kilowatt hours early in the trip, one, it should warm the battery just a little bit, and there'll be a little bit of heat soak from the first 35 miles, so that's good for efficiency. But two, I'll arrive at my destination with a few more kilowatt hours in the battery than I would if I didn't charge at all, and that would give me more flexibility about finding chargers at the other end. For example, I'm aware that when I get to Woodall Spa, which is where I'm heading for, there seems to be a monopoly on chargers with BP Pulse, or the old Polar chargers. Now there are some 7 kilowatt Polar chargers, and there's a single rapid charger, Polar, again all BP Pulse, in a place called Coningsby, which is where the RAF Typhoons are based, and the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight is famous as a World War II bombers airfield. So if those chargers, when I arrive, aren't available and don't work, then I'm going to want some extra charge to drive on and go somewhere else. The somewhere else that I've worked out is Boston. Boston, one, it has a Tesco pod point, so that's a good emergency, or a good free top-up, depending on how much time I really want to spend for free on a pod point charger. But there's also Instavolt chargers, so the perfect chargers for me. They would be my go-to charger, that and Osprey, or what were they, Ingenia, they used to be, Osprey. So those are my two favoured. Alpha Power as well, I haven't tried yet, but I really want to. But there just aren't any chargers en route, and that's part of the downside of going this more leisurely route. And I'll just slow down because I just realised I'm at a 30 limit and I hadn't slowed fully down. So a bit more admin. Temperature, well, it's 5.5 degrees. The air is pretty thick outside, as you can see. I don't think I've seen such thick fog for quite a while. I do not have the heater on. I am plenty warm enough. What I want to see is what sort of efficiency can I get getting to Fakenham. I want to see not just driving normal, not driving fast, but driving a little bit more cautiously. What sort of miles per kilowatt hour can I really get? How I want to learn about this journey and learn about how I can optimise it and make it the easiest journey for me, the most enjoyable journey for me, with the best stats as well. So I'm going to add 20 kilowatt hours on a free pod point at 7 kilowatts. So I'm going to sit there for 3 hours. So I know taking 10-15 minutes longer is fine, it means nothing to me, but 3 hours extra charging versus, I don't know, how much would it take? 20 kilowatt hours at 50, we're talking half an hour, so 3 hours versus half an hour charging. Now that is a big chunk of time. Now partly I've left so early because it gives me more flexibility in the day, so I can still get back at a sensible time, even if I did spend the 3 hours charging. So I've given myself more time. If I'd have left later, I probably wouldn't have had this fog. I probably would have had slightly better efficiency, because obviously fog's damp and pushing through the air. It's almost as if I'm driving in the rain, I guess. the windscreen wipers are being used a lot. So yeah, I've sort of not optimized the leaving time. I've optimized it for giving me lots of flexibility of what I want to do, but I haven't optimized it for efficiency. The roads are dry though, that's really good, and it is due to be a really sunny day. So 5.5 degrees C temperature right now is probably within the next 2 hours, well, 3 hours, or 4, is probably going to increase up to the mid-teens. So I expect 14 or 15 degrees Celsius today. So the return trip will be in much warmer conditions with sunshine. The battery would have been fully warmed, so I know full well the return trip will be more economical than the one going out. It always is in electric cars. If you set off early in the morning, go and do something or see someone, the battery will have warmed up, you'll have got some heat soak, the weather will have improved, and your journey home, unless it's at night, will be more efficient. So I guess this is one of the biggest differences with an electric car, isn't it? With a petrol car, you wouldn't have done any of this planning, any of this thinking, you would have just driven. Now part of the issue is, because I know the roads and the route, I know roughly where all the petrol stations are. So I know them already, and that's, I think, what people forget about the move from electric cars to... Sorry, it's just a message coming. Front camera field of view restricted. Alright, okay, so it's actually worked out it's foggy and it can't see by the sound of it. So restricted view, that's going to be the pedestrian monitoring system, and the automatic braking system's not going to be working. That's okay. First time I've seen that, but first time I've driven in that thick fog. Anyway, what was I saying? I really have lost my train of thought. Yeah, I was saying about the difference between ICE and electric cars, that you do take it for granted in an ICE car, a petrol or diesel car, that you know where the petrol stations are. You don't think about that as being a benefit of driving a petrol or diesel, because when you move to electric, you don't know where the charging stations are, and because you don't charge out very often, or I don't, you don't have very many opportunities to work out where they are. They're not signposted on the road, they're not always literally on the road you're driving like a petrol station. They're off-piste a little bit. A lot of the Instavont chargers are at banner time gyms, for example, and you know, unless you absolutely know that, and unless you've pre-looked on a map to find them, you're not necessarily going to see them, because they're tucked in corners of industrial estates. So electric car driving is very different, because the first thing you encounter is you don't know where the chargers are. You've got years and years and years of knowledge that it's not that you're throwing it away, but you take for granted in a petrol or diesel car, and you've got to start again learning where all the chargers are. So I think that's part of the issue with charger anxiety. It's just this learning curve of learning where the chargers are. The more you've driven an electric car, the more you've driven longer routes and charged lots out. So the people like James and Kate online, and Richard and Vicky in the Kona Electric group, those people that are driving out and about a lot know where the chargers are. They have a lot more confidence about the chargers because they have a lot more experience of them. So it's a different transformation having an electric car when you are much more experienced at where all the chargers are. It comes as second nature as to where they are. So I have done a lot of planning about this journey. I've studied ZapMap, PlugShare, a better route planner, Google Maps. I've studied a lot of planning routes and looked for where all the chargers are, and to see what options I've got. Now, going the A47 route, charger wise, it's a much more preferred route, because there's a fantastic charging hub at Necton, so I can do a quick stop there if I really wanted. So the most optimal charging route is to take the A47, do a little boost at Necton, which is about 40 miles away from me. I could easily add 5, 6, 7 kilowatt hours very, very quickly. Just slowing down my torque here because it just went really thick again. There's really not a lot you can see. As you can see with that truck coming the other way, you can't see a lot until the last minute. So the good news is there's nothing behind me. I haven't seen any headlights behind me on my entire trip so far, so I'm obviously not going too slow and people are catching me up. There must be someone back there. So yeah, the optimal route is probably the A47, a stop at Necton. A lot of the planning apps seem to want to get me to charge at King's Lynn, and although theoretically that sounds good, the charger that it wants me to use at King's Lynn is almost in the centre of King's Lynn, so it's off the route a little bit, and I've got to go into the centre of King's Lynn to be able to use the charger. So, and it's an old one, and I'm not certain about how reliable it is. I've never used it. It's not on a network I'm familiar with. So for me, it's a no-no. So even though all the planning apps are telling me that's where I need to go, because it's a 50 kilowatt charger, it's available, they don't have a preference on the app as to what I should use. That's my personal preference. So for me, I would charge at Necton to give myself a little boost, skip across King's Lynn and head over into Lincolnshire, and then there is pretty much an oasis as you're heading through places like Holbeach and Spalding. You've got some, again, pod points, 7 kilowatts, but there's no rapid chargers there until you get over to Boston, when there is an Instavolt. So again, my trip is based on, in Norfolk, there are a decent amount of Instavolt chargers, and therefore those are the ones I'm aiming for mostly. In Lincolnshire, yes, there is this BP Pulse one at Coningsby I could aim for, and again, you know, if it's 100 odd miles to get there and I've got a range of 120 to 140, I can just drive comfortably, go to that BP Pulse, presume it's working, charge up and not worry about it, and then just turn around and drive back. That just sounds so much more simple, doesn't it? That it's the charger that's closest to me. It makes more sense. So the only complication is my doubt about whether the BP Pulse chargers will actually work, because I don't have a subscription with them. You know, why would I have a subscription for something on a monthly basis that I'm going to use once or twice a year? If that is just no point. So I could have an account with them, but I don't, because I don't want to give them my bank details for a couple of transactions. I want to pay as you go. I want to turn up, tap my contactless card and charge that way. But apparently, if you want to do that with these BP Pulse chargers, one, it costs more, but two, it works a lot less often. It seems a lot less reliable using that method. Now, I'm suspicious that that's deliberate, because they want you to subscribe, and therefore they're not making it easy for you to use contactless, but it's just getting them a bad reputation that their chargers are unreliable. So more and more people will do what I'm doing, which is plan around them, and there are other chargers, there are other options, so I do not have to use them. And that's what this journey is all about. It's about choices. It's about working out what my preferences are and applying them. It's not what your preferences might be. You might do this completely differently. You might drive a lot faster, just get to the first charger and not worry what it is and give it a go and presume it's all okay. Whereas I don't want to do that, because I know full well I see so many reviews online, especially by journalists, where they're always aiming for the chargers that don't work. They've always got a story to say about, oh, you know, I got there and it didn't work. Well, I don't want to present those stories, because it's not real life. Why would you plan to do something which has a much higher chance of not working? I just don't understand that. I would plan my day and plan my routes around a greater certainty. And if that means 5, 10, 15 minutes extra time travelling to do that, then for me it's a better journey, because it's more guaranteed. And yeah, it is still early days with electric cars, isn't it? And the charging networks, they're not as reliable, but they're going to have to be, because one, they won't survive, and two, not everyone with electric cars will do this sort of research and this sort of journey to test things out. Not everyone's as logical as me, and they just want to get in the car and go, and then they'll moan when they get there and it doesn't work. So the chargers really do have to sort themselves out, and I think think what we'll see is more companies that are doing really well will take over the companies that aren't doing very well, and therefore they'll get their charging locations, upgrade them, and then make them better, and support them better. So companies like GridServe that are now, well, I would say taken over Ecotricity. Ecotricity, I know, still owns 40% of its electric highway, but it's a takeover, isn't it? Because GridServe are managing it, GridServe are running it, they're upgrading them. So you're going to get GridServe reliability from some good locations that Ecotricity had. And I think we'll see that more often. And I wonder who Instavolt are going to take on and take over. The sad thing is the oil company ones, they've got the money behind them that they don't have to sell. They can still do acquisitions. So where Shell and BP, if they're not very good and not very reliable, they're going to stay not very good and not very reliable. So that's not ideal. But companies like Instavolt could look to take over other networks and acquire them. But what other networks out there are there that they want? I suppose, you know, Alpha Power are doing their own thing completely differently, including the type of chargers that they use. So is Alpha Power something that Instavolt could take over? Well, Osprey, I don't see them taking over because Osprey are very good. So who else out there? I suppose you've got the what are those? I keep wanting to say eVolt, but they use eVolt chargers, and I can't remember the name of the charging company, but it's got a huge government contract to put chargers in across the country. Is it Swarco, something like that? Well, again, they're not going to be taken over. They're too big with too many big contracts. But I absolutely hate their chargers and charging locations. They're all in damned car parks, and you know, they want you to pay a bloody car parking fee while you're sat charging. Don't like them at all. The Morrison's ones, there you go, the Genie network. The only reason I don't like aiming for those chargers, I think there is one at Fakenham. The only reason I don't use those is I don't have an account and don't want to use the app. But in theory, I could go online and use them. Maybe I should give that a test today as well. When I get to Fakenham and charge up, maybe I should try one of those chargers as well. Because I've never done it, I've never used them. So it's, I'm being an EV novice here, that there is a load of chargers available to me, mostly at Morrison's superstores, and I have never used one, and therefore have low confidence about how to do it. And yet they might well be perfectly available and perfectly good to use. So I ought to give them a go one day and see whether I want to add them to my list. It's just that my understanding is you have to sign up for an account to get them to use, for you to be able to use them, and I don't really want to have to do that. I don't like signing up for accounts and giving people my details. You don't have to do it for filling up a petrol, and as a principle I just do not like it, giving it out to charging companies. And if you do with lots of them, one of them is bound to lose your information at some point. Now, I've got a bit of a challenge here because I've come down a road into Fakenham and I don't think I've ever been down here before. I've never been on this road, so I know from looking at a map roughly where this charger is, where the Tesco Superstore is for the pod point, but I actually don't physically know. I've got no actual idea. So because it's not a petrol station, it's not huge, I'm not going to see it easily, but because it's Tesco's, I hopefully will see a sign that says Superstore or something. Okay. I suppose I could change sat nav and navigate to it, but there's Aldi, so I've never seen that before. Oh, look at that, there's a Zoe. Restricted zone, except in signed bays. I wonder if that Zoe was going for a free charge at Tesco's, the same as I want to do. So that road's closed. That's fine. I don't think I want to go down there. Well, this is a bit of a minefield, isn't it? Through traffic, yeah. So I'm looking for a Tesco. Sign, but there we go. So where are the chargers? Don't see them. There they are, all the way down the bottom. Okay, let's quickly plug in and get going. Okay, there we are, we're plugged in and we're charging. So I've arrived with 77% state of charge and a range theoretically of 88 miles to go. So I did have enough charge to get to my final destination. This is about right, what I was thinking. 77%, I was thinking about 75. So I've used a quarter of the battery. I've used 6 or 7 or 8 kilowatt hours of energy. So yeah, if I was to stop here for an hour, I'd fill back up to 100%. We've just clocked over to 78%. But what it doesn't show me is how many kilowatts I'm charging at. I've got to presume that it is 7, the rate that we're actually getting. So I'm going to have a look round, set the pod point up to charge beyond the 10-15 minutes. Go and have a look at the signs to see how many hours you're allowed at this car park, whether it's 1, 2 or 3. Have a look at those and see if the charging rate is showing on the screen as well. So I'm going to have a wander around now and leave you to it. Anyway, efficiency wise, what are we doing? 4.7 miles per kilowatt hour, and it was 35 miles to get here. The temperature is now up to 6.5 degrees C, and yeah, it says 86 miles of range left. But 4.7, that's not bad considering the fog and considering how early and cold it is. I'm quite impressed with that. Anyway, more later. Catch you later. So rather than wait in the car for it to finish charging, I took a wander around the town centre of Fakenham, and there really are some lovely old quaint buildings, so definitely worth a look, despite some of the modern housing around it. Okay, quick update. I've been here for 45 minutes on the charger, and basically I got fed up waiting any longer, so I think the car is at 92% state of charge with 98 miles range. So I haven't added that much range, but the temperature is now up to 14 degrees C. So on to the next charger. That's the idea. Good news is that as a charging location, as a pit stop on the way, is pretty fantastic. It's tucked away in the corner of a car park. There's some walks around, there's some shops around, there's Tesco itself if I want to buy something. Sadly, at this time in the morning it's not actually open. It's open at 8 o'clock in the morning, and it's 3 hours maximum stay, so plenty of time. So yeah, a good stop, a good test. I now know where this is, I'm now confident about it. There's 4 charging sockets there, and they look in very good state of repair. So everything very, very good about this location, apart from, wouldn't it be nice if it was just a little bit quicker? But I guess, you know, you can't have free rapid chargers everywhere. Maybe one day electric cars will have not just 11 kilowatts, but maybe it'll be more kilowatts just on AC power, and we'll be able to charge on pod points in the future at 20 kilowatts or something, yeah? Who knows what's coming in the future. Anyway, I'll sign off now as we drive out of Fakenham. I'm heading for Boston now, next stop.